Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Social Engineering for Community Associations webinar. I'm Marketing Manager Sherry Branson. I'm now joined by the founder of Kevin Davis Insurance, Kevin Davis, and Kevin joins me from New York. Hi, Kevin.
Yeah, hi, how you doing?
Doing great, doing great. We're both on the East Coast in the same time zone.
East Coast? Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And nice to be out of LA for a while. This is kind of my first trip out, and it's been nice. It's nice. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. It's nice to be able to travel again and go to an airport and take a trip. And I know a lot of people are excited about summer vacations and getting out there. And by the way, happy Prime Day and happy second day of summer too.
Yes, it's summer solstice was yesterday, right?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. We don't work for Amazon. We're just happy that it's Prime Day. So. And now, Kevin, today we're going to talk about a very timely topic. You know, we're seeing lots of news stories every day about cyber breaches and data breaches and ransomware attacks, etc. So can you talk a little bit about the goal today that we're trying to accomplish?
Sure. You know, it's interesting. We're talking about social engineering today. It was 2015, first time we talked about social engineering. And we talked about it, and nobody, it was like 3 people on our webinar when we talked about it back then. And I tell you, today, there's no more important topic than social engineering, because it's something that has impacted all. In fact, our goal today is to talk about the 5 things you need to know about social engineering, not only to protect your community association clients, but also for your own personal protection. That's what we're going to talk about. It's going to really go into some detail about the things that we're seeing every day about social engineering, and hopefully can help you out in terms of not only personally, but in terms of getting coverage when something like this happens. So I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be something that's going to last a long time. This webinar that we talk about today, we'll talk about again in a couple of years from now, and it's going to be even more complicated than it is right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's more and more breaches happening every day, as we just discussed. I did want to mention a couple of things. I record all of the webinars, and I put the recordings on our website, which is kdisonline.com. So feel free to listen to today's recording and all of our past webinars going back about 10 years. And if you have any questions during today's webinar, there's a questions box on the screen on the right-hand side. Type your questions into that box, and if we have time at the end of the webinar, we'll answer your questions. We'll do a little Q&A session. Kevin, I was reading a statistic the other day that Cisco says there's going to be more than 65,000 ransomware attacks in 2021 alone. So it's really becoming a huge problem for businesses and community associations and us personally.
Yeah. In fact, he also said at Cisco is that there's 2 types of people: those who've been hacked and those don't know if they've been hacked yet.
Yeah. I mean, it's really happening to everybody. Like you and I have experienced the emails, and we were just talking to Troy a little while ago about it. I mean, you know, everybody, I don't know one person who hasn't been affected by it.
And the key thing is that keeps us all together. The glue that puts all this stuff together is social engineering. And that's, again, why it's so important to talk about these things. So, yeah. So, number 1, you ready for number 1?
I'm ready for number 1.
All right, so this is number 1 thing. Again, we're talking about 5 things you need to know about social engineering. And the first one is that you are a target. You know, you personally are a target. So, and again, and we've talked about it already, and we're going to go into a little bit of detail. But first of all, let's talk about what social engineering fraud is. So social engineering fraud is the use of deception to manipulate individuals into divulging confidential or personal information that are used for fraudulent purposes, okay? So basically, it's the intentional misleading of an individual, okay, by masquerading as a friend, as a vendor, as a client, or a board member, employee, property manager, anybody right there. It's the intentional intent and misleading by masquerading as this person. That's what this social engineering fraud is. So if you look at what happened in a typical hacking situation, they target the computer system itself. Most hackers target a computer system. Somebody using social engineering, what they're doing is attacking you.
Yes, and I get those emails all the time, and a lot of them look very legitimate. So I can see how they're able to trick people. And if you're getting a lot of emails, you might easily just click on the link, and that's it. You've been hacked.
That's the point, because what they do is they use systems of communication. We're talking about either something in writing, a text, an email, it could be a voicemail, all these different things they use. And me, it happened to me like 3 times, okay? The first time happened to me a couple of years ago, and it happened to a lot of us a couple of years ago, and that's when somebody duplicated my Facebook page, where they took my picture and just stole it and said, hey, Kevin Davis, started going after all my friends, and they asked for money,
Wow. Okay, so they even hacked your Facebook. They created a duplicate page, correct?
Exactly, and this went after everybody. Now, my friends don't have any money, so they knew it wasn't real. I would never ask them if they'll have anything.
So it wasn't really worth their time, but
it wasn't worth their time.
Right.
But the second time it happened, they masqueraded as me when I took a trip to Hawaii to do a cyber seminar. And I put it on Facebook, on LinkedIn, that I'm going to Hawaii to do a cyber seminar. By the time I got there, our controller in the office said how many gift cards I won. Okay.
Oh, wow. Incredible.
Somebody masqueraded as me, okay, to say, hey, I need gift cards to give out to my clients in Hawaii.
So they hacked your emails, and they got all your coworkers' emails, and they were able to email the operations manager.
No, it wasn't even a hacking. They just went right to the LinkedIn page to see that I was the president. It wasn't even a hack. It was social engineering. It was just somebody, nothing to do with hacking. Somebody just went and looked and saw I was the president and was able to masquerade themselves, okay, as me. Okay?
I see.
And asked and say, hey, send it to this. And we'll talk a little bit more about what it is. And the third time is that, again, you look at this email you get there from eBay or Amazon saying, hey, guess what? Thank you for your visiting our website and placing the order. And I didn't place any order. So then you call them up and they have access to you and they say, please confirm your credit card immediately. So it happens. It happens. That's why it says you are the target. We are the target. And we are all the target. And we have to be constantly aware that we're a target and be vigilant about it, because we will be tricked into it to the point where we'll download something, we'll click on something, and all of a sudden stays in our computer. That one time they find something that's worthwhile, and all of a sudden either A, ransomware will happen, or B, data will be missing, or B, your whole account will be gone.
That's scary. And look at the Colonial Pipeline hack. That shut down a huge company, and it affected gas prices and really affected the U.S. economy. So, they're hacking people, individuals, and huge corporations.
Yeah, and again, you go to it's like, why are we the target? Okay, why are we? What happens to us? Okay, and if you look at this thing, about this whole target thing, we're not IT professionals. We're not IT security professionals. We're not a CIO, CSO, any of those things. We don't have a go-to person that's qualified. We don't have a documented security incident report. Do you have a risk assessment plan, Sherry, when something happens to your computer system?
I don't have my own risk assessment plan. Unfortunately, I don't. But maybe I should have one.
But see, that's the point. That's what happens to the thing like Colonial Pipeline, all these different things, because we don't. Individuals, we don't. Corporations do. But with social engineering, it doesn't matter what the corporations do. It doesn't matter how many classes we go to, in our corporation, and but nobody teaches us how to click on something that says, guess what? And the first thing we always said, well, it looked official. Isn't that what it is? You click on, well, it looked official. It looked like something that I should have clicked onto, right?
Right. They look real. Yeah, they look, that's the scary part. They do look real, and I can see why people do click on them.
And we will continue to click on these things, because again, it goes back to a simple thing, is that we need to be able to be more diligent about what we're doing. We have to slow it down. We have to look at where it's coming from. In fact, that's our next slide. Let's go to our next slide there, where we talk about what it is, these things actually look like. What do these things look like? When we look at these social engineering, it starts by who's it from. Instead of being UPS, it'll be UPSS. It may be from Amazon, but it might spell the S instead of the Z. They may add an extra letter in there, and it looks so official, but that one thing may be a difference. The key, though, and again, when we talk about vendors and we talk about clients and we talk about some of the things that really where they have the big money is at, look for this one word here. Please make a note of our new bank and routing number. When you see those things, okay, that's where the difference comes into play. You know,
Absolutely.
It's
I'd like
different.
to throw in an example. When I was at a trade show a few years ago, a property manager said she received an email. It looked legitimate at first, and it was from one of the board members saying, could she cut a check for $10,000 to buy a painting for the lobby of the condo association? And so she decided to pick up the phone and call that board member, and it turned out she'd been hacked. They had hacked into her email. So it was fake, but luckily she's caught it, you know.
Here's the one's interesting. Here's a 15-year-old. His name was Gain Gamble, who successfully used social engineering to get into the email account of the CIA director, John Brenner and James Clapper. You know, those guys you've seen all over the TV last year, right? Here it is, the director of national intelligence, okay? And they got it through he persuaded Verizon, pretended he masqueraded somebody who actually worked for John Brennan, and he got all his information about Iraq and Afghanistan.
Oh my, wow. That's, yeah. I mean, if he can be hacked, that means anybody can be hacked, really. I mean, it's, if they can get, if a 15-year-old kid can do that, that's pretty scary.
Kid. Yeah, and again, they use phishing, which is email. They use phishing with a V, which is the actually using a phone call, or they use texting. It's another one for texting. And all they want to do is use this thing, and now with all that COVID stuff, it was so obvious and so easy to get people to click on things to get updates on COVID. And everybody getting updates on COVID, and most of it was social engineering fraud taking place. So you can click on the link and get it into the system. So this is one of those things where, again, we all get impacted by it. It impacts all of us. We don't know, okay, how much it's impacting us right now. And again, either we know we've been hacked, okay, or we've been hacked and don't know it yet.
That's scary. That's a scary, scary thought. But I can see, you know, I've had a couple emails in the past couple of weeks that were definitely spam, and I almost clicked. Luckily, I didn't. Luckily, I didn't.
All right, so let's talk about community associations now. I mean, that's what we're here to talk about, the community associations, which is number 2. So the first one is Uter Target. The second one is community associations are extremely vulnerable to attacks. Why are they exposed? Why are they? Okay, because they're small businesses. And small business, they do not have the things we just talked about. They don't have the computer specialists. They don't have online help. They don't have any of those things. So they're easy target. And because they're easy target and they have assessments, they have reserve funds, they have operating account, they make them prime targets for that. Also, again, they lack experience and expertise. That the things that they need to protect themselves, they don't have it. It makes them a prime target for these scammers.
And many people and many property managers and people working remotely in 2020. So that remote working adds another facet to it and makes people more vulnerable.
Yeah, because again, it takes your eyes off the ball. Distraction, distraction, distraction. If you're distracted, if you can't be aware because of all these things that's going on, if you live in a community association, your expanded role. Okay, you have to worry about cleaning everything every hour on the hour, the door handles, all the equipment. You have to worry about COVID protocols. You open a gym, you close the gym. You don't have the knowledge, experience, you're frustrated. You have to worry about enforcing rules, okay? You have to worry about bullying and harassment. You have to worry about people not caring. You have to worry about caring too much. You got maintenance issues, you got budget. All those things are so on top of your mind. All it takes that one person to understand that and say, what you just said is that, guess what? You know, we need to pay for the landscaper, it's overdue. Please pay right now. Here's our new bank and routing number.
Right. And, you know, a lot of the property managers and board members were overwhelmed by COVID and all the new responsibilities that they're shouldering. So when they're getting tons of emails, they might just respond quickly and not, you know, not pick up the phone and call to see if it's legitimate or not.
And again, this happens every single day and has been happening. And right now, most people it's happened to and don't know the true cost of it happening. And that's the problem. is that, some things are easy. If I spend $1,000 to pay my landscaper and fictitiously paid him because he's masquerading, I lost $1,000. But if somebody is social engineering to get into my system and waiting for me to either steal my identity or for me to click on something at work so they can block the whole system out so they can use, again, extort money from me, that we don't know about. So it is really, really, really critical right now to really understand what social engineering is, why it's important more than any other thing that's happening on the whole cyber and hacking front.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I did want to mention again that I record all of our webinars, and I put the recording on our website, which again, if you haven't visited our website, is kdisonline.com. So feel free to visit that website at any time. I have marketing flyers. I have all of our webinars. I have product videos as well, so you can learn more about our products.
Okay, let's go to number 3.
What's number 3, Kevin?
Next ones are really the critical one, because this is about the coverage part of it. Number 3 is it may not be covered under cyber policy. When you look at the cyber policy, these are your major coverages you have, okay? This has been going on for several years. The e-commerce extortion coverage has just been, now it's the most popular one, because you're seeing a lot of that. But historically, it was about 2 types of coverages. Network and information security liability, which is defending it once you're sued, because you were hacked, you were sued because you were incompetent, you didn't have enough information, you didn't have the right security, you didn't do things you should have done. You're sued. That's number 1 coverage. And then notification expenses. That was the 2 coverages that people sold for forever in terms of cyber coverage itself. Once that hack happened, you have to notify everybody, you have to have a breach code, you have all these different things going on. That was people buying. Crisis management expense, defense costs, computer restoration. That was it. So when you're talking about a cyber theft, you're talking about theft of data, not theft of money. Talk about theft of data. So everything was geared towards that. So if you had a social engineering event and it amounted to a loss of data, you had no problem there. The problem is that it went over to the line. Now you're talking about loss of money, loss of reserve account, loss of operating account. And if you see, there are crime coverages there. You have computer fraud, funds transfer fraud. You have those things in there are for crime, but they never talked about social engineering. It never mentioned it. So your cyber policy may give you coverage for social engineering that led to data breach, because that's what it does, lead to data breach, and it can lead to e-extortion, for the Bitcoins and everything. But if somebody actually gets into your account and was able to trick you into giving you the reserve account, operating account, because they say you were the president of the association, then all of a sudden, it doesn't mention anything here on the section.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you're voluntarily handing over the money, but because you've been tricked, you've been conned into giving it away, but you are actually giving it away. So that's the difference.
Yeah, but there's never thought about before. Again, when we originally talked about cyber policy, it's about 2 coverages. It's about the liability part, because I've been sued, which is network and information security, and the data breach notification expenses. That was the one I always cared about. And then we talk about the regulatory expenses. So now all of a sudden, the state comes in and Attorney General comes in and fines us for $100,000 because we were incompetent to do the things right. And crisis management. Those were the coverages that we did. Those crime coverages, this computer fraud, funds transfer fraud, were all covered under the crime policy. So what they did was make the assumption that cyber data breach, crime, theft of funds, and theft of money. So right now, if it doesn't say social engineering coverage in that crime section under computer fraud, funds transfer, social engineering, your cyber policy may not have it. And again, everything we talked about so far, we're talking about losing lots and lots of money because you were tricked into saying, guess what? Here's my new bank and routing number. Please pay on time to avoid any late fees. And then come from Gabriel, can you order a roofer? Just imagine you have a new roof coming on and the roof costs $30,000. And all of a sudden somebody goes and hacks the roofer contract and then starts sending out emails saying, please pay that $30,000 down to avoid late fees. And now all of a sudden the money's gone.
Mm-hmm. It's
Yeah.
scary. I mean, it's a very important coverage to have, more important now than ever, I think, with all the extortion going on and tricks and cons and fake emails coming in left and right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So yeah, if social engineering happens because of a data breach or because of e-extortion, because of Bitcoins, you got coverage there. But from a crime side, it may not, unless it's in there, it's not covered.
Okay.
So that's number 3. So we got 3 things you got to know about right now. Okay. You're the target. Mm-hmm. So let's go to the next one, number 4.
Okay.
All right. Number 4 is excluded under your crime policy. Right now, social engineering is excluded under your crime policy. So I just told you all those great wonderful things about it's excluded. It may not be covered under your cyber policy. It is excluded. Why is it excluded? Because something called the voluntary party exclusion. The crime policy will not apply to loss resulting directly, indirectly from the giving or surrendering money, securities, or property in exchange for purpose, whether fraudulently or not, rather a loan inclusion. So days when you voluntarily surrender money because you were duped or because somebody's masquerading or impersonating you, there is no coverage.
No coverage. So if I was that property manager that had received that email asking me to cut a check for $10,000 to buy that painting, and I did it, I cut the check and mailed it to that person, then, if they had no social engineering coverage, that would not have been covered.
Yeah, and the problem is people believe that should be either wire transfer fraud or computer fraud. And so the number one question I get asked all the time is, how is social engineering fraud different from computer fraud and funds transfer fraud? It is that question over and over again. And people don't understand the difference. In computer fraud and funds transfer fraud, the insured loses that money without the insured's knowledge or consent.
Okay.
So if somebody comes into our office there, Sherry, okay, and I happen to leave my computer open and have my password on there, and somebody comes in and transfers, the reserve account, operating account to their personal bank, that's computer fraud. It's without my knowledge. Or if I click on something and somebody's able to move money around, it's without my knowledge. And social engineering fraud, an employee of the organization is a knowing and active participant in the theft.
Yeah, they're conned.
Actually gave the money. Yes.
They're conned into handing over the money or whatever the person wants.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. One is, I didn't know what's going on. The other one knows exactly. And if you know exactly what's going on, you're surrendering money. And so that's the difference. This has been debated for the past several years because everybody believes that if money is stolen from them, and the money is stolen because they weren't entitled to the money, they illegally received the money. It should be either wire fraud transfer or computer fraud. And it's neither, because of that exclusion that says you cannot do it. That is the most important thing.
That's the key point. That's the key difference. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that leads us all to number 5. The 5th thing you got to know. There is no standard coverage for it. There's no standard coverage. Either it may not be there at all. They have different names for it. But what you're looking for is this. If you do have an endorsement, the company will pay the insured for direct loss for the transferring, paying, delivering money, securities directly caused by social engineering fraud. That's what you need to see. It may not call it social engineering fraud. It may have different names for it, but that's what you want to see. The company is caused by, the cause of loss is social engineering fraud, which goes to what is social engineering fraud? What is it defined under that policy? Because here it is. It's the intentional misleading of an employee to be a client, vendor, employee, or authorized person using any type of communication. Key thing is be aware of any verification provision in the social engineering endorsement. A verification is something really simple. Is that if you don't call ahead of time and say, is this legitimate or not, there is no coverage.
Okay, so that's really important. That's a very, very important point. You have to pick up the phone and check.
Yes.
And
some policies have that. So if you see something, a verification provision in this endorsement, do not buy it, because they should not have a verification provision in there. They should not have it. Some policies limit to vendor and client only. And some say vendor and client by a signed contract. Employee, some don't use authorized employee, and sometimes communication is defined as just emails. You got to make sure it goes into even a written document when somebody gets something in the mail and tries to trick you. So it has to be broad. If it's not a broad situation, coverage won't be available.
Okay, that's a very, very important point. Very important point.
Yeah.
So if anybody, this is a lot of great information. We did have some questions that have come in already. If you all think of any other questions, feel free to start typing them in the questions box, and we can answer them as they come in.
Sherry, this is the important piece of it.
Oh, go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, this is the important piece of it. You're covering social engineering fraud. You want to make sure that somebody misleads your employee, and make sure that word employee is defined broad enough to pick up non-compensated board members and a property manager. Okay? Because it may only be people compensated by wages, salary, and commission. If you're compensated by wages, salary, and commission, and you're the president of the association, and that's not happening, you're not covered. If you're a property manager, you're not covered. So you got to understand who an employee is. You got to understand the definition of a vendor is and a client. Okay? And employee is there. If you can do these things right now, then you should have a decent social engineering fraud endorsement to your crime policy or an endorsement to your cyber policy. Both of these have to be endorsed to those policies or they don't exist. Nobody heard of social engineering fraud up till 5 years ago, and now it's the biggest coverage out there that's necessary. And I would say right now, most people in our business do not have the coverage.
Oh, wow. These are some very, very helpful tips about looking for this, the right type of social engineering coverage. What is social engineering fraud? What things to be aware of, like the verification provision, etc. There's a lot of nuances to the social engineering coverage that you really have to be aware of when you're buying it, or to make sure that you even have it. You might assume that you have it because you have a cyber policy, but you might not. Great. Kevin, would you like to answer a couple of questions? A couple of questions have come in.
Sure, let's do it.
Okay, this is from William. Thank you so much, William M., for asking this question. Okay, in the case of multiple victim parties, where does the responsibility of a property manager end and the association begin? Or even if there's additional property management with their own customer association?
Okay, I get it. Okay. Basically,
okay. Then he goes on to give an example. Then he says the fraudulent information is passed between them where one is portrayed as asking for money and the other thinks they're paying the correct entity, the real person. The criminals infiltrate the email system of one and use that against the other. Does the fault lie in multiple parties, and how do they separate that?
Okay, got it. It's easy. Okay. Say this is what happens all the time. You have the landscaper. The landscaper gets hacked. The person who hacks the landscaper has an email address, sends it out to all the landscaper's clients. Landscaper clients says, please pay now to avoid a late fee. Here's my new bank and routing number. Sends to all their clients. Property manager gets it. Property manager sends out the money. Money's gone. Now all of a sudden the board member, president gets a phone call from the landscaper saying, I haven't been paid yet. What's going on? I don't know. Let me call the landscaper. Let me call the property manager. The property manager says, oh, I sent this to the landscaper, 2 weeks ago or a month ago. What's going on? That's social engineering loss. The landscaper's out of money. The board president is have to pay twice, and the property manager lost the $1,000. That's it. That's the triangle that happens in something like that. So social engineering coverage, as long as the employee is the board and the property manager, you're okay.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for your question, William. Thank you so much. That was a great question and a great answer, Kevin. And Elaine had a question, but she says that her question has been answered. Thank you, Elaine, for your question. She had just wanted to know if social engineering covered under the crime policy or under the cyber policy. And as Kevin had mentioned before, it can be an endorsement to either one. They have them for both. Okay. Oh, and William actually has one more question. Again, if anybody else has any questions, feel free to send them in. William would like to know, at what point is a property management employee working as an employee of the association?
Okay, yeah. Well, you have to make sure that the property management employee is defined as an employee under the crime policy. If he's defined as under the crime policy of the association, then he's covered. Okay. Most crime policy out there will not extend to the property manager. If it doesn't extend it, doesn't matter. Social engineering fraud, you got to make sure the management company has their own social engineering fraud policy. However, the problem is, again, most of the time, the association is the one that's losing funds. And that's it.
Okay. Okay, great. And William has another question. William,
William's busy today.
Yeah, William's busy today. Thank you, William, keeping us on our toes. This is good. He has a follow-up to what you had answered before. You know, the first question, he'd like to know, what if the landscaper knew they were hacked and didn't notify all the vendors?
Okay, again, that's two separate things. Okay, you have a cyber loss, which is loss of data breach loss. Okay, he has certain things he has to do by law. Okay, now once that money is gone, then all of a sudden, now you have a certain situation in terms of social engineering fraud coverage under the crime policy. He has to do certain things. Once he's hacked, he has to do certain things by law, notification. If he doesn't notify people, that's when you have the lawsuit comes in, he gets sued, or somebody come in and fines and penalties. So that's what happens in there. So.
Okay. And just a couple of questions that have come in, just kind of general questions, Kevin. Do we need an application? Do you need an application to get social engineering coverage?
I would say right now, if you have a small limit, anything under $100,000, okay, there's no application, and pretty much it's automatically under our crime policies, automatically $100,000. As long as, not automatic $100,000. If you have a limit of $25,000 on the current policy, you won't have $100,000, but we go up to $100,000 with no application.
Okay, great, fantastic.
Over that, you're going to need an application. Anything over $1 million, you're going to need a huge application.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a lot of coverage. That's a lot of coverage. And is there a separate retention amount?
Sure. Retention is a 5% retention. So that if you have a $100,000 limit, the retention is $5,000.
Okay. Okay, great. And what's the average premium, just in case people are wondering?
Sure. It is an interesting thing. Okay. So we have all those losses we're talking about. For a $100,000 limit, and it depends on the size association and the base premium. We're talking about anywhere between $50 to about $75.
Oh, okay. Very, very reasonable. For such an important coverage, that's very, very reasonable. Fantastic. Well, thank you, Kevin. Thank you for a great webinar. Lots of good, helpful tips and great information. And thank you for joining us, everybody. I did want to mention one more time that these webinars are recorded, and I put them on our website, which is kdisonline.com. You can listen to the webinars at any point. And if you'd like a copy of the presentation, please send me an email to sbranson@kdins.com. Have a great afternoon, and everybody, please have a safe and healthy 4th of July, and we'll see you in August.
All right, take care. Thanks.
Take care. Bye-bye.